Which piano got you in the end? Which one wanted the most revenge? Because in the movie, there's one piano that like somebody in the interview is saying you destroyed it or something, and maybe that's the one that got you.
No, no, that one's long been since retired. That was, that was 20 years
You
ago.
know what I was remembering? I was telling Jeannie, by the way, sends her love to you and says, say
Oh,
hi,
thanks.
Vince. And I was talking to Jeannie about being out on the road with you in the Vote Common Good tour. And I said, literally one of the only solidly good memories I have, because like, that was just felt relaxed and happy, was that
Yeah.
morning you took me to breakfast.
Oh, that was so great. That foggy morning out on the pier.
I loved it.
Yeah.
And we were watching all those surfers in the rollers. Then we went out and ate this great breakfast. And you just sort of snagged me and said, let's go to breakfast. So it was such a nice thing.
Yeah, I remember that fondly.
We need to do that again sometime.
We do.
And we were in your neck of the woods kind of thing. Wasn't that your part of California where we were that?
Yeah, yeah. It was where I would used to summer, like Escondido area, kind of Ventura.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you said, oh, we'll walk up here and they have breakfast at the end of the pier. And it was really nice.
Yeah, that was a great time.
Okay. So let's do this here. My name is Frank Schaeffer. You are watching live and or listening to a podcast called In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. And my guest today is genuinely an old friend. We go back a long ways. We've done things together before, and I'm thrilled to be talking to my friend Vince, Reverend Vince, otherwise known as Vince Anderson. And he is working today with someone who I have not met before, Nick Canfield, who is the director and cinematographer of a movie about Vince. And I've watched the film and enjoyed it very, very much. It brought back a lot of memories because everywhere you showed up in the movie, Vince, I've been to with you and or spoken in that venue. And it's like, I could just feel myself there again. And some of the other people you interviewed, I know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So Vince is, let me read our little bio here, and then we'll actually ask you who you are rather than what's official. Reverend Vince Anderson, who left seminary to take his message and music directly to the people, has been making, quote, dirty gospel with his band, the Love Choir, for over 20 years. He has a habit of starting churches in bars, and then he invites people like me to come speak in his church in bars. And they're great. I mean, if you want to call them services or whatever. And the movie, Nick, I want to compliment you because the movie really captures the essence of what I personally experienced. A lot of times you watch something, a documentary or a movie, or you read a book, and you may like it or not like it, but it's not about a subject that you personally intimately know. And I personally intimately know Reverend Vince, and I intimately know those venues, and I have, walked the walk, talked the talk, been there with him on that. So first of all, great job on the movie capturing
Mm.
Vince and who he is and what he does. And then I have a question for you, Nick, before we get going.
All
And
right. And thank you,
what
by the way.
what are we promoting here in the sense of how can people who watch this help you get the movie seen more? Like if it's an author, I'm holding the book up and saying, order it. If it's a website, I'm saying, go to it. If it's just Vince, I'm finding out what bar he happens to be hanging out in, preaching in, and I'm saying, go and donate something. What do you want to have come out of this? I know that's a real weird way to start an interview. I'm serious. Tell me exactly what you want, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, we would love for people to, and haven't heard of Vince to go and watch the film. It's available on the Criterion channel and it's available on Amazon Prime Video. So people can go and just search for the Reverend.
Yeah.
And you can get there's a soundtrack album of as well. So you can get that on Spotify and all that kind of stuff. And you
Yeah.
can order vinyl and then just, follow the film on Instagram, the Reverend Film, and help spread the word about Vince's positive message and this wonderful community that he's created. So we just hope that people will enjoy the film and share it with their friends.
Well, since we're on a podcast with people who tend to follow me, let me just say, if you've ever wondered, I wonder what kind of close old friends Frank Schaeffer has. Vince is one of them.
Yeah.
And that's a little dangerous because sometimes, Vince preaches naked or something crazy. So you may be just saying this confirms everything I thought about Frank. I mean, look who his friends are. But so Vince, let me ask you a question. How did you get involved with this film? Did Nick did you already know Nick, or did he approach? I'll ask you both, take it in any order. How did this start? Nick, who knew who first, and why did you make the movie about Vince? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, Vince's show had been going on for over 10 years before I first started going, and I'd seen him play for 5 or 6 years, just as sort of a fan, and then one day I kind of realized Vince is really affecting people here, and I want to showcase this music and what he's doing to the world, but I'm also curious about what he's doing in his private life and in his spiritual life, and so I wanted to explore that in a documentary. And I knew Paula, the saxophone player, one of the oldest members of his band, and so I knew her a little bit. And she set up a meeting with Vince, and a film that I had worked on, one of the last Masel's film, was in theaters at the time, and Vince got a chance to see that, and we met, and it took a little convincing, but here we are.
Then you did it. And Vince, when you started making this project with, a movie project about you, because you're one of the people that I know who I can genuinely say has no ego whatsoever. You're the real deal. And I know you because you're out there performing funerals for people no one else will bury, homeless people. And back in the day when nobody knew what AIDS was, really helping folks, including some who had passed away. I mean, you've done really amazing things, and you're not the kind of guy that wants a movie made about them. So I'm interested in why you got involved in this, and I think it's done you justice, but I'm just curious, how did that look from your point of view?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I was very reluctant, to say the least. I mean, I had experience with documentary filmmakers before, that ended not just badly, but like comically badly.
Yeah.
So I was a little hesitant, and also, me, Frank, like I don't necessarily like recorded things of me,
Right.
because I do live in that live, either on stage or in relationship with people. It's all about being in person.
Yeah.
So I'm always scared of like recordings or a film that wouldn't do it justice, But then on the same thing, COVID happened, and we realized that I couldn't be in person everywhere anymore. So that's when I started. The film had already been made at that point, but I started warming up to the idea of it, because saying, well, this is a way for the whole world to see. And what I've been telling people at Union Pool is that now we're going to make this little room available for the entire world.
Yeah.
That it's a testimony to the strength of this community and this little room, this little Monday night where things happen.
Yeah.
And things so amazing that the whole world needs to see it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with it now. And also I'm so glad that this 10 years, which was the decade I met you, and the all this, that time, which I think was a really important time in my journey, and I think in a lot of our lives' journey, is now there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's there for the record.
Yeah.
And that's good, because times aren't going to get easier. So if future generations need an inspirational film when things are really, really bad, maybe we got one.
I think that both of you should understand how I saw the movie, kind of an underlying theme in it that isn't in the movie, and so it's stronger because you're not saying it. It's just there. And that is, of course, the context when I first knew you is all pre-MAGA, pre-Trump. We go way back, and you're doing stuff. How would we ever know that the Christian community, even those who have come out of it like me, and I regard myself as an atheist, but one who prays because of the way I was raised, but I'm still sympathetic to the better parts of the evangelical world I came from, which is certainly no longer in existence. But who would have ever thought that as we go into the election cycle of 2024, you would literally need proof. You'd need proof that there was ever a better form of Christianity than the one we now associate with Christian nationalism and the MAGA movement. And instead of talking about that in your movie, the movie just provides that proof. I mean, literally, that's how I would use it. If someone, say, in an interview, like I'm being interviewed, and if someone says, well, what happened? And is everybody going in this direction? I would use this film about you. And I would just say, well, look, I really would encourage you to watch this movie about Vince, to just broaden your own horizon on what the word pastor means, on what the word service means, on what the word spirituality means. And times are so bad in terms of the image, if you want to put it that way, of anything associated with anything vaguely Christian now. It's so, it's so bad that one is tempted to, and I know this is a way over the top analogy, but it's like getting to the end of World War II and you're trying to find some Dutch Christian like Corrie ten Boom, who did not collaborate with the Germans, but hid somebody and took care of them and helped them get away. We're in the same position. I just think the deserved reputation of evangelicals these days is so bad, deservedly, post-MAGA, post-Christian nationalism and the rest of it. I mean, how could you have seen this, Nick, but you were providing, as it were, an argument for not giving up on the whole message by producing this movie. I don't know. Maybe I've jumbled this up. Does this make sense to either of you?
Yeah, it speaks truth to me, Frank.
Yeah, because that's how I'm looking at the movie. I'm saying, hey, here's exhibit one. It's not all the same stuff. I don't know. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was something that I wanted to showcase in the film and explore. I mean, like, Vince's form of Christianity is open and welcoming and accepting of everyone, and it's also very personal. You know what I mean? I think he can speak about it better, but that everybody can find their own path and their own way and can take what makes sense to them and leave the rest. But that other sense of extreme conservative Christianity that kind of gets blended in with all these cultural elements, that was already there even when I started the film. It's just gained this prominence now. So I always kind of like the idea of us being able to reach out to Christians who and kind of be able to show another way, and also to be able to showcase, I think, to other people who are not necessarily not Christians at all, but just find it alienating because of what they see, that there's a sort of like open, more interpretive Christianity that Vince has.
Yeah. Let me just dive in a little minute here, Nick, with you and ask you what your background is. I don't know what you know about me, and it doesn't matter because we're talking about you and Vince in the movie here, but my background is one of having left the evangelical community. I was raised in a evangelical conservative missionary home in Switzerland in the 1950s and 60s. And then became the sidekick to my dad, blah, 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 and then eventually fled the movement about 35, 40 years ago and have moved steadily in a different direction. But I kind of get various pieces because of where I came from. I'm wondering what the comparable background you had. Who are you? Who was your mom? How were you raised? Where are you at now? I just want a little bit of your journey so that I can place this movie in terms of where you're coming from.
Interesting.
Yeah, I grew up sort of nominally Christian, essentially, but I did go to Episcopal school. So, I learned sort of the basics, and we would go to church and that kind of stuff as part of school. And then as I got a little older, I actually got more interested in it, and that's when I kind of learned a little more about Christian theology, but always kind of from that, that more progressive school. And I'm reading about Gnostics and things like that. So and then I was sort of a Jack Kerouac kind of Christian, which makes me like half Buddhist, the DT Suzuki and things like that. So I was interested in the exploring the sort of parts of Vince's theological beliefs and where he stood in things, and there was a lot that we filmed and a lot that I was really interested to learn from that ultimately we couldn't include in the film because you can only include so much, but also you know, a real deep dive into some of that stuff is a kind of a whole other movie.
Mm. Hey, and Vince, let's just fill people in who don't know about you. We're trying to get them to watch the movie, but there are so many shots of the film, or in the movie. Let's say the most recent iterations of your uh, you know talking and playing in the context of the bar. As I look at that audience, they skew pretty young. Um, I think you described a lot of them are in the movie. The movie says, I forget who says what in the movie, but kind of survivors of evangelical backgrounds who have kind of moved on, a little bit similar to the sort of place I come from. Who's coming to your services, concerts, meetings these days? Who would you just say? I know there's no typical story, but like who are we looking at these days?
Well, we're still looking at really young people. We still keep getting older, and the audiences keep getting younger. But that's
Yeah.
that's the way it works, I guess. And it's interesting though. We get that group of kind of like post evangelicals or recovering evangelicals. But a lot of people that that were raised none,
Sure.
and are that I would say that's the prominent now
Yeah.
of the demographic. We're also getting older people, I think, because of the movie. Like they're just coming to check it out.
Yeah.
Like every show, you've got like this couple in their 70s, a different couple every week, just kind of
Yeah.
looking. And then always we and they post COVID now they've been coming back around. We get a lot of the Hasidic community.
Yeah.
It's right down the street there.
And what do the Hasidic, are these observant or post?
Oh no, they're participating. They're younger. Um, so then we also every few months get the older guys that come to round up the younger guys and take them back home.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So describe for us,
They
Vince,
call me Rabbi Anderson there.
Rabbi Anderson. Yeah, well, that'll do it. Describe a little bit for folks who haven't seen the movie yet. And listen, we're going to make another plug for the film and make sure everybody sees it. So we'll keep doing that. But describe what people who haven't seen you do your thing. It's a bar, it's a tunnel-like little room. It's an odd place, but it's very charming. It's all kind of wood paneled and credible. It's like actually serendipitously looks sort of like a Hobbit bar in that it's built sort of rounded and going down that into that room.
Well, you're thinking the Pete's Candy Store. Yeah,
I know. Pete's Candy Store is where I always picture you, even though you're all over the place. But remember, that was like going down a little Hobbit tunnel.
Yeah,
you ever go back to Pete's?
Totally was. We played Pete's for their 15th year anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Not recently ago. And went back in that. I always thought it was like the prayer car or the chapel on the Siberian Express.
Yeah, it was like a railroad car because it had that shape, and everybody sat down the edges, and we'd have our little platform at the end, and that's where we did our shtick.
Yeah, and that used to the front of that bar was an actual candy store at one point, but that the church was in was a illegal casino.
Cool. Yeah, you and the bootleggers. So the present venue, bring me up to date.
So we're at this place called Union Pool now, and that's a little bigger.
Where is it?
Proper stage. That's also in Williamsburg.
So you're still in Williamsburg, right?
Oh yeah. And we just celebrated 26 years now of the residency on Monday.
Doing the thing. And are you and so just describe what you do, what time of the week it is, time of the day, who's there, and what it looks like now. I know you're up there playing with the band, and everybody's kind of all the faces were sort of familiar to me.
Yeah.
So just bring me up to speed on like right now, because I haven't been.
Yeah, sure. Well, right now, people call it Monday church, Monday night church. It happens at 9:00. It used to happen at midnight, but everybody has jobs nowadays, so we had to move it to an early hour, because the young people actually work 9-to-5 jobs in New York City now.
I think it's because we're all getting older, Vince. That's why.
Well, maybe that's it too. But it looks like an old soul review now, kind of.
Yeah.
At least it starts that way. The band comes out, they play a little bit. I come out, it's showbiz. but then once I get out, then anything is possible.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a really improvisational band. And lately we've been really going in deeper to the music. And now the songs have become real improvisational. I would say that we're kind of on spiritual jazz a little bit.
Yeah.
And going into that world. I got a synthesizer, Frank, now. So
Wow.
I'm making all kinds of woo, woo space. We're getting a little
That's
more
cool.
up in the cosmos now because Earth's a little horrible. So
And how much speaking are you doing? Two questions. How much speaking are you doing? And are you still sharing the stage a little bit like you were? You had me, you had other people come in. You were kind of running a joint operation for a while with Baker.
Baker, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering what the shape of the quote service or the Monday night thing is.
Well, there is a liturgy, I guess, because we start with the same song, which is "I Get Out of My Way," so it's kind of invitation for the bad spirits to leave and give us some time, and then somewhere it's all through music now. I really found my voice through music. So if appreciation happens, it comes directly out of the music. So the band gets quiet, I start saying something. The other thing that we're doing in the program now is every week I open up the floor to questions.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and and you get the what's the meaning of life, and all that kind of stuff. But people are I love that part because it shows that we're all we're naturally curious.
Sure.
And I think that we've lost that because of the corporations are telling us what to watch rather than us finding it on our own. Corporations are telling us what to listen to and what to think and what to do, so that we don't have those friends anymore, those older people, the crazy guy with the VHS collection that used to I go over to his house and he's like, we don't have those, those weirdos are still around, but people don't utilize it. So that's part of it too. I think that I think the band now is kind of a council of elders up there. We're all past 50.
Yeah.
Playing for these 20-year-olds.
And what sort of questions are you getting in terms of the scope of the people? Like you're talking about, you got some Hasidic Jews in there, you have these former evangelical refugees, and then whoever else wanders in. What's the range of things they're talking about?
Oh, you can get anything. You can get anything from your real new agey stuff, to what's the meaning of life? like what am I supposed to do when everybody hates me? These kind of universal questions are like, what if I don't feel like I've got a purpose in life? Or what is the purpose of life? Or one we got a couple of weeks ago was haunting because this person, there was no humor to it. Just, why does God hate us? I'm like, okay, you're gonna have to take my email for that one.
That's a good question.
But it does lead to these conversations. Even if I give it, they're more question and response because I don't have the answers to any of these questions. But to give them the platform to be asked, I think is really important, and to do it in a live setting, not in a fucking chat room.
Yeah, exactly, and very live because it's coming out of the music. Do any members of the band ever speak up, or when the questions happen, is it you answering the questions?
It's me, but everyone, if it's a question about me, then the band does not hesitate.
They'll tell the truth.
Now's our chance.
Yeah, now's our chance.
Yeah.
Hey, let me reintroduce you a second. My guests today are director, producer, and cinematographer of a movie called The Reverend, which happens to be about a very old and very good friend of mine. And Nick Canfield is this director, producer guy. And the movie's about Vince Anderson, or the Reverend Vince, or as I've learned today, the Rabbi Vince. You keep changing hats, no pun. And the movie is available. Nick, guide us through that again. Just tell people watching or listening to this what they can click on to watch this movie.
People can watch it on Amazon Prime Video. They can rent or buy it there. And then if you have the Criterion channel, you can also stream it on that service. And so I hope people will go and look for it and follow the film on Instagram, the Reverend Film, and get Vince's album and help us spread the dirty gospel.
Hey, and Vince, if someone wants to show up, and we, by the way, just quickly add, Nick, that we're not making you do all the work here. My producer Ernie just texted me this on the message section saying we have links to the film wherever this episode goes. So we're not complete, we're we I don't have my shit together, but Ernie does. So we're all set.
Thank you, Ernie.
Great.
Ernie will make it so. So let me move forward a little bit, and talk about what you're doing with the other 6 days of the week when it's not Monday. Back in the day when you and I were hanging out a little more, and I was in New York a lot more and coming to see you here and there and everywhere, and down at Samir's place down in at the NYU campus where you were doing music, we would touch base here, and then I'd see you at the Wild Goose Festival, and then all of a sudden we're in California and you're taking me to breakfast. It was an odd friendship, geographically speaking, but you would do things like somebody would come to you and say, this drug addict has just died of an overdose. No church, no friends, nobody. Reverend Vince, will you do a service? And you would do things like that for the really unloved and untouched. And you had connections with a lot of people who would come to you for stuff that was quite interesting. And I'm just wondering, with the other 6 days of the week, besides music, and are there some other churches you're involved with? I know that in the movie there's an Episcopal church or an Anglican church or something that you do something with. Just bring me up to speed, because I don't want to take the movie as the last word on where you're at, like right now. What are you doing the other 6 days of the week?
The Episcopal Church is Bushwick Abbey.
Yeah.
And then that church also that parish has another church called the Iglesia de la Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
So I am currently playing music for both of those.
Yeah.
Which means I've learned Spanish a little bit, at least had ecclesiastical Spanish.
Yeah.
Which is great. And then really my job there also during COVID. So I am my title there is the Minister of Arts and Community, music, the Minister of Music and Community Arts.
And this is at Bushwick.
This is in Bushwick, yeah. And so my job there lately has been to do all the music, but also we opened up a community fridge during COVID, and now I have a really strong food program where we're distributing almost 2,000 meals a week.
Wow.
Out of a tiny little church.
Yeah.
And so that's been a lot of what I do. And then also kind of a holdover of when you first met me. During COVID, I ended up doing a lot of weddings.
That's cool.
For weddings that got canceled. COVID, and then we did them right outside the window, so they would stand on the street.
I love it.
And open up the window, and then my wife is a chef, so she would prepare a little hors d'oeuvres and champagne, and I did about nine or 10 of those weddings during lockdown.
Was that out of your house?
Yeah, so it was just
people were basically coming through your little vegetable garden and where you do stuff and grow things.
Yeah. So it was just stay on the front of the street, and we'd open it up, and then the whole neighborhood would open up their windows and look at this couple getting married.
I'm not being facetious, but did you do this I'm not this is not a jokey question. That's good about the weddings, but were you also doing any COVID funerals? Did you bury anybody?
I did do one COVID funeral, and it was more of a COVID memorial. I didn't bury anybody because a lot of these bodies were kept up. Yeah, I mean, there just weren't funerals happening.
Yeah, no, I know.
But I did do a memorial.
Yeah.
And that was a very intimate. It looked a lot like this right now. It was like the family and a few other people, and it was really just it was beautiful. It was a time of sharing, and it was almost like, wow, this is all memorials should have a Zoom call.
Yeah, no, I understand. When one thing I wanted to ask you about was in the present context, what's your connection with any of the people who were coming to the Monday service? I know in the Bushwick and the churches you're involved with, that's a sort of a churchy structure that does other things, studies and kids and food banks and all the rest. Do the people who come and see you on Monday, do you see them in any other context? And do some of those guys then want to come to one of the churches you're involved with other than just the Monday quote service concert? Is there relation? Do these things mesh at all, or are these completely separate things?
Well, they certainly mesh in my own mind.
Yeah.
And in my own heart. So I don't see any separation between any of it.
Yeah.
So when people do ask me if they can come, and I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, it's it might be a little different than Monday night because it's Sunday morning, but
Mm.
you know, and so that does happen. And also, in the film, there's a scene during the Q&A
Mm.
where I give someone my phone number.
Mm.
And so I found that my phone number is readily available and that people call it.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to call it or text me. Like if I'm the only, one of the blessings I have is that I get to be the guy, right?
Yeah.
If I'm on stage. So if somebody out there is really lonely, really, really lonely, and they don't have anybody, they have me.
Yeah.
I mean, I encourage them to find somebody other than me.
Yeah.
It's more sustainable, and I can't have that many friends, but I can be there for you.
Yeah.
And maybe help you find some friends. So, and I think that's a responsibility.
Yeah. And of the
I think
people,
it's a responsibility that I take seriously.
yeah.
I think actually a lot more artists need to take seriously because a lot of times they're the only person they're the only person they see is the guy singing or the woman singing. Like make yourself available. You as an artist are moving these people. So in whatever way you can make comfortable for yourself to make it to have so they can have access to you and have conversations. That's really important to me.
Yeah, I know that because I've been out, doing things with you and, talking to people is something you do, and making yourself accessible is kind of rare, I think, even for pastors, let alone for people who's, doing music professionally. And my sense is that sometimes that probably gets taken advantage of, and there are people you wish weren't calling you, but most of the time you're probably doing something, in a pretty lonely city. And I'm wondering if some of those guys who need the friend skew young, and when you look at them, they don't look like the kind of person who doesn't have anybody. They look like they'd be together and connected, and maybe they aren't.
No, for sure. You can certainly you can go out every night in New York City and have a lot of people that know your name and still be very, very alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say that happens in the city to people who come in from outside the city and somehow perhaps have a rift with their family or just far away? Or is it more a psychological issue that they feel alienated? What kind of people are we talking about in the context that you're in?
I think honestly, Frank, I think the young urban professional that is coming in, that's kind of a new thing to New York City. Like we didn't have people that moved here. You had the financial realm for sure, but for the most part, people came here to follow a dream and work their asses off to support that dream.
Yeah.
But now you get young people that are moving here. Their dream is to have a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
And that that's caused, I think that's caused an alienation that we didn't have before because people that live in their condo building in Brooklyn or Queens and then come into the city to do their work or go to their computer more frequently now. So there's, like this isolation is just very pronounced, I think, in the city. And it's deceiving because, of course, there's people that fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
and you have to so yeah, so it's hard. It's hard to point out to find the lonely, and it's hard for the lonely to identify themselves.
Yeah, and I find, go
I
ahead.
hope that Monday, uh, that gives it, I tell people all the time on that Monday, like when we're singing, turn to your neighbor and sing, turn to someone you
Sure.
don't know and sing, like if we're singing, maybe we can break the ice. Maybe there's, and I know connections are made on that Monday. I've married
Yeah.
people that on those Monday nights. I've married them.
That's
So
great.
connections do happen. And that makes that to me, the fact that at least one couple met on a Monday night and got married and had kids together and it built a life because of a Monday night show. That to me, I am the most successful musician on the face of the planet.
I love that.
Because that happened at one of our shows. Wow.
Beats online dating.
Yeah. I mean, that's Reverend. Maybe that's a great idea, Frank. Maybe I should start my own online dating platform.
I think you should, but you can say it's sort of a reverse. You actually have to show up, and we'll introduce you to someone.
Yeah.
Well, you're like a matchmaker.
Online actually showing up.
Yeah. You gotta, 2 rules. You gotta show up and you can't be an asshole.
That's it. Hey, those are the 2 rules for the whole of life, by the way.
Indeed.
That's right.
I as you know, Jeannie and I have been together for a long, long time. And if someone said, how did you make this work? I'd say, well, Reverend Vince actually summed it up this way. And that is, you have to show up and not be an asshole. That goes for movie crews and everybody else too. You just show up and don't be an asshole, and we're home.
That's right.
I mean, we should write that one down. Maybe that will just, that's the title of my next book. Show up and don't be an asshole.
Well, and that's a lesson I had to, I know you had to learn it, Frank, and I had to learn it too.
Yes, no kidding.
And I think everybody has to learn it because I don't know. I don't think we're born assholes, but I think we're raised to be assholes at a very early age.
We are. Yeah, in the background I came from, you're raised to dominate people because it's God's will that men should be in charge and you're supposed to be all these things. But, it's kind of you're groomed to be an asshole, and then you have to unlearn that stuff. But I wanted, there's a couple things I want to talk about, but one of them, just stick with the people you talked to in New York and on Monday and in your church there. It seems to me, as someone who's been in and out of the city quite a bit, that New York, very much like London and Los Angeles, these are cities where you go as a young person in order to feel cool and like you're doing something. And of course, it takes a lot of work to be cool and to feel invulnerable and like I'm part of this big thing. Especially young people don't have the wisdom to understand that everyone's in the same position they are. And that, nobody's cool, actually. We're all just trying to either show up and not be an asshole. But they think someone else knows shit they don't know. And then they eventually realize, no, the promise of this city was false in a way, that just by being here doesn't make anything work better. And I'm wondering, I think that one of the strengths of what you do with the music is you cut through that, because I would be willing to bet there's no place in New York City at that moment on Monday that's like what you're doing. There's no church like that. And if they're doing counseling, their counselor's not letting them sing with the person next to them. The mental health aspect of what you do without talking about mental health, I think, is huge.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. The single actually that is being released, this song, Please Don't Give Up.
I certainly do. I love that song, by the way. And we used to sing that on the road when you led us on the tour we were on in
the book tour. We would do that. And that song has transformed, become many different songs over the years. And originally, I wrote that song because of a friend of mine died by suicide, and it was a song to her that I never thought I would sing publicly.
Yeah.
And then I sang it public, and I just one Monday, I was like, maybe I should try. The band hadn't heard it. We tried it, and we got to the chorus, and the entire, unprompted, the entire audience sang the refrain, "Please don't give up, we need you now."
Yeah.
And it proved to me that well, one, like you said, the music can cut through and 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 proclaim messages that need to be heard.
Yeah.
Like, you're good enough. Don't fucking kill yourself.
Yeah.
In a way that is life-giving and celebratory.
Mm-hmm.
And so the single now features the Resistance Revival chorus and Mia Pace. And that song started as a lament.
Mm.
Now it's a celebration that we don't have to be alone.
Yeah, I love that.
And
having sung it with other people when you were leading us in song on the road while we were campaigning for congressional candidates.
yeah,
Wasn't that the 20? I get so mixed up. There's so much
that was
going
2000. That was 2016.
That was 2016. Yeah, we were out there campaigning away. Yeah, so I have a question for you, Nick, just to move the subject a little bit, and that is, this also comes from my producer Ernie. We'd both like to know how your work with the Masels perhaps informed your cinema verite kind of style and all the rest. Just talk about that connection a little bit. Tell us who they are for a minute in case people don't know who they are. Talk about that a little bit, if you would, Nick.
Yeah, well, the Masel Brothers, Albert and David, are among the sort of originators of what they would call direct cinema, or what you call cinema verite, or sort of observational documentary. Right. And they were really pioneers of that in the late 50s and in the early 60s, and made some really well-known and terrific and groundbreaking films, meaning Salesman, which is like sort of, I think, Albert's his favorite film of his, which is about door-to-door Bible salesman in the 60s.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that's a terrific film because it's just, he observationally follows these salesmen, and they're just salesmen. They're not actually, true believers. They're just trying to sell Bibles just like they would be selling anything else. I mean, most of them are Catholics from a lot of them are from Boston and kind of that area, but they're just trying to make a buck essentially. And it's really just a great portrait of America at that time, because they follow them all around and go inside people's homes, and there's a lot of wonderful things like that. And then also they made some well-known music documentaries like Gimme Shelter, which is about the Rolling Stones and the concert at Altamont in 1969, which is sort of famously has been described as the moment when the 60s ended. Yeah, when exactly. When the camera zooms in on them watching the Hells Angels, like having killed somebody at that concert. Yeah. So and then David passed away in the 80s, and Albert continued making films, and I was very lucky to come and work for him as his camera assistant, and then as a cinematographer on the last two features that they did, and a few other films. So I worked with him for 7 or 8 years, and that was really great. And we did a documentary about Iris Apfel, actually, who just passed away a few days ago at the age of 102. And so the Masel style is sort of, funnily enough, I would actually really well describe it as what we've just been talking about: show up and don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole. Yeah, which was yeah, exactly.
Which is exactly what Albert did. I mean, it really involves just being there a lot. You have to be there a lot, and that's what I did with this film. And you have to, to the point where people get comfortable with you and sort of forget that there's a camera filming them in another way, and feel like they can open up to you, and also to not come in with an agenda or a story that you have prefabricated, but let the story reveal itself to you, and just try to be honest to that.
Which I think you've achieved in the movie, by the way, very well, because like I say, I do a lot of talking to a lot of people about a lot of stuff, but I don't usually know the subject. It's like, but like, yeah, you're making a movie about a guy I know pretty well. I have a question too that goes to both of you here, because it's about the movie, Vince, and it's also something, Nick, that I want you just to talk about this amongst yourselves, as it were. Ernie wrote this question out for me, and I think it's a really good one. This service, in other words, what you do, Vince, and Vince's local weirdo riff, if you want to put it that way, speaks to the decline of the ruling class and the grassroots rediscovery of our humanity. I mean, you're so clearly, and I mean this in the complimentary way, you so clearly are an outsider's outsider. I mean, you're not, there's only one Reverend Vince. So you're not part of the ruling class. And yet, you speak to all these people who are basically these young people have come to New York to be part, their best dream of success in their life is to be part of the very thing that you are sort of providing an alternative to. I know this is a weird way to put the question, but in a way you're calling them to kind of a humanity which success in their chosen field is doing its best to extinguish.
Yeah.
Instead, there's folks meeting in your church, getting married and having children, and or you're burying the dead or giving them a wedding ceremony through an open window while your wife cooks something for them. This is the absolute opposite of what you associate with the power elites of New York in their little clubs or, at the big media centers and so on. So I just think that's a really good question, that somehow what you're doing, speaks to the decline of the ruling class. They're not meeting this need. No one reads the New York Times and the New Yorker and comes away feeling what they feel when they're singing your song, Don't Give Up. And you're filling this in as an outsider's outsider, but in a way, doing a job that wouldn't have to happen if there was a spiritual quality to the humanity of the city itself. I put this wrong, but maybe you can pick something good out of my question.
I would add of unearthing the spiritual quality of the city. It's always been here. It's always been here, and lately I found that the only shovel that works is music.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the shovel out and you get all the stuff out, and then my hope is, and we're getting on a theme here, but these future power elites will be influenced by that little room on a Monday night.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll be influenced to make their places of business or their family life or their circle of friends to make it work a little, to make it look a little more like Monday night, which is to say, to make it look a little more like the neighborhood of God is what I've been calling it lately. This beloved community that we all hope for and cherish, and funny that my oddly enough, my Uber ride today from occupational therapy was an older Asian fellow that was saying that was bemoaning all these condo buildings and says they're destroying our neighborhoods. He goes, New York is a series of small towns.
Yeah.
These fucking condos are destroying us.
Yeah.
And so anything that anybody could do, whether it's sing a song, preach a sermon, paint a painting, make a TV show, direct a film that goes against that tsunami of destruction that is literally trying to destroy New York City.
Yeah.
To make it a theme park for the rich. And anything that can be done to fight that, that's a good fucking fight.
Yeah, no kidding.
No, and I think there are people that are doing it. Nick is one. You're one. And I'm seeing younger people that are saying, fuck this shit. We got to bring it around again. And I'm very hopeful. I am, witnessing this younger generation every Monday night. I think they're getting a bad rap.
Yeah, I agree on that, by the way. Yeah.
I think they're going to save us.
Yeah.
They haven't figured it out yet, but they will.
Yeah, their instinct is to do more than just simply spin the wheel again.
Yeah.
It's to do more than just do that. And that heartens me. And I did I have a little commentary I do called It Has to Be Said. And my last little rant was to say, it's easy to blame younger people because somehow they're not as whatever, and they're not dating as much or having sex as much or, doing whatever my generation or the whatever came next doing. But I said, look at the hand they were dealt. And I wasn't talking about the big environmental issues or anything, but just what you're talking about, the human side. Um, what were they given? So let me ask Nick and you, Vince, too, both what you would hope to see come out of the viewing of this film as part of that thing, that kind of humanizing. It isn't all about $3 million top floor, 2-room condos built on these little skinny towers overlooking the park. There's more going on here than that. But how do you see the movie contributing to this? The movie's bringing some more people into your Monday meeting, and will continue to do so. People want to find that and come. But besides showing up and watching the movie, how do you see this movie influencing people? Because I think there's enough of your actual message in the movie that the movie itself becomes something people can see and benefit from. It's more than just about people who meet, and I think the movie can mean something to people, who aren't necessarily there. How do you see that?
Well, for Nick, I want you to speak on this too, but for me, it would be, I think the film asks a fundamental question of what makes a life. What makes a life? And I made a real hodgepodge of a life. And I followed the things that gave me joy and bliss, and that I thought things that needed to be fixed, and the world needed to be a little better. And so this kind of notion of just live the life that you're supposed to be living. And maybe someone seeing someone such as myself saying no to the conventions and no to the conventional way of doing things, and saying no to going this way or that way, saying no to all these wins and and just saying, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, so this is what I'm going to do. And it's weird as shit, but it's working out, and so maybe that just people seeing a life that is a little different maybe can inspire people.
Well, and I'll ask Nick to jump in here too, but from my point of view, looking at your life and what you do, hey, people, you can actually get away with this. You can be a real person and eat and have a place to sleep and have someone to love.
Exactly. Amen.
Your very existence and what you've done.
You can build an actual life. You can, it's real. It's not fake.
Yeah, no,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Giving people the courage to be themselves and to accept other people for who they are, you know what I mean? And regardless of what background that they're in or environment they're in. And I think people forget that. And a lot of times it's easier to just, to go along with the whole flow than it is to kind of to speak up and to stand out. And it takes courage for that. And I think that, seeing Vince do it and getting that emotional support from the music, I hopefully will give people the courage to do that in their lives every day.
Yeah. And I find it very encouraging. I mean, just, some people's life, the fact that they've pulled off something that is as countercultural and unconventional, but at the same time, in a context where they do something recognizable as a musician and so forth, encourages people who may be in totally unrelated fields, but it's like, I don't have to do this thing that's been laid out for me. Look, Vince somehow got away with this. I can do what Vince did, even if he's not or she's not doing the actual the actual thing. And I think that's really, really important, especially when everything's so homogenized with all these online influencers and everything. No, you don't have to do any of that shit or buy any of the products they're selling, because look, Vince is Vince. And I really love that. I visited Switzerland where I grew up last summer. My grandson of mine was getting married and we were officiating and helping with that. And we all went over. And I was struck again by the fact that the mountains that I grew up with, the shape of the mountains, just like the shape of the New York skyline, if you're on, in certain places, that whatever else out there in the world was changing, that wasn't. And I found the consistency of knowing that you're out there doing what you're doing for all these years. There, it's one thing to come up with some new proposition. It's another thing to do it for long enough so it has actual credibility. and you've been doing what you're doing long enough. So you're your thing. You are what you do. I don't know if you want to address that at all, Vince or Nick, but I think the consistency of a life well lived in a certain direction begins to validate that choice in a way that the short-term thing or the younger person can't do.
Mm-hmm. I think those stories are really important to tell. You know, and thank God that there's people such as Nick and storytellers like yourself, Frank.
Yeah.
That tell these stories, and we got to keep fucking telling these stories
We
because
do.
our survival depends on it.
Yeah. And I love just ending on this note, Nick, that I think your movie is gloriously emphasizes, and that is, this is not your cookie cutter reality. You know, when you see Vince doing what he does, this isn't, you know, there aren't 50 other people doing this. This isn't like it's an exceptional way to make your stand, but it also has reached out to people, and you can see that written on the faces of the people in the audience watching you and singing along and so on. You don't have to go deeper than just looking at their expressions in a lot of these shots to understand what's going on. I found that very touching in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, Vince, you know, he wears his heart on his sleeve, I think, on stage, and people can really feel that emotion and they connect with it, and gives people, you know, I think, an opportunity to let their own emotions out, and he showcases that he's, you know, he's almost, to use a Buddhist term, he's got like he's got the crazy wisdom, which is a Chogyam Trungpa term, but it's what he described to me the other day. He just said it in a different way, which is to have curiosity about everybody that you meet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know, each and any person it could be the Buddha. So you have to give everybody that same grace, you know, each and every time you meet them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the big tell here, in terms of just this discussion and knowing Vince, that rings so true about the movie, and, you know, you two, Nick and Vince, but also just Vince, what he does there on Monday, and then with the people who come to the church as well, is that, you know, here is someone saying, hey, here's my phone number. If you're alone, give me a call. And he means it, and it happens. And that's, in this world, that's rare. And puts the words that back that action up into a completely different category. Okay, well, we're going to link to the movie everywhere this shows and/or is seen or heard. And I'll just end by saying, Vince and Nick, if there's something that I haven't spoken about that you wish I had asked or said, you know, could you please bring that up now before we wrap out?
No, this was great, Frank. Thank you.
Nick,
thank you.
I asked a lot of the same questions, and you asked different ones, so thank you for that.
Oh, good. Well, I didn't ask from a list. I basically, this was my own curiosity.
Good.
Well, Vince, this is an odd way to wrap this out, but I'm sorry that I'm not in the same room with you, because it's been a while since I hugged you. And
let's make that happen in the next 6 months.
We will. Yeah, I owe you breakfast, and I'll hug you wherever you show up. And Nick, hugs to you too, and thank you for providing a hug to your viewer, because your movie embraces the viewer and makes the viewer feel they've really been with Vince and seen something different and something really wonderful. So, breath of fresh air. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank.
I've got a way to end it. Our benediction.
Yes.
And we're all going to say together in unison the benediction from this call, and maybe the benediction of 2024. And I'll say, show up and don't be an asshole. So let's all say it together.
Okay, on three. Show up.
1, 2, 3.
Show up.
Show up
and
don't be an
asshole. Amen.
Much love, guys.
Much love, Frank. Thank you so much.
Yeah.